Hello, good morning, and welcome to our M&A Partners webinar on getting the most from your Xero accounting software. My name is Gary Brown. I'm a member of our business services team and have been with M&A since 2014. I'm a qualified accountant and I am also a Xero certified advisor, so hopefully you should know what I'm talking about when it comes to Xero. I'm joined today by my colleague David Talbot, our director of the business services team. Before we start, some quick guidance as to how to navigate the webinar platform. At the top of your screen, you should see a speech bubble icon, which will let you send us a message or raise a question. David will be monitoring the messages, and we will try to answer any questions as we go through. We're expecting the webinar to last up to 45 minutes, so there should be some time at the end for questions if they come up. If we don't have enough time to answer any questions, we'll deal with them afterwards by email. Don't worry if you have any internet problems or anything cuts out during this. We will send everyone a link to the full recording of the session later on, so you can catch up on anything that you might have missed. So what are we going to be covering today? Well, we're going to try and go through some hints and tips, things to help you get the most out of Xero. The sort of areas we're going to look at, speeding up your bank reconciliation. It's one of the areas that can be a pain if you've got a lot of transactions to go through. We're going to talk about some ways to really speed up that process and help you have to spend less time doing that. Entering manual journals, something that you may need to do to put in extra bits that aren't coming in from your bank. Better reporting. Xero's got a lot of reporting options. We're just going to touch on some of those and some ways to possibly get a bit more useful information from them. Managing your contacts. A big contacts database available within Xero. Keeping on top of that, making sure it's as useful to you as possible. Rounding. We're going to touch on how Xero deals with rounding and ways to help you use that better. And some quicker navigation options to just move around the software that bit quicker and save some time in all the things that you're doing. So I'm going to move into Xero itself now. So I've just got a demo data here, demo set of company data, which I'm going to show you some of the things that we're talking about. So as we mentioned, the first thing we're going to look at is the bank reconciliation. So I'm going to go into that here. Now, hopefully you're all fairly familiar, if you're already using Xero, with the bank rec screen and some of the ways you've got of reconciling things, where it's automatically matching things, where you can manually enter what transactions are. Some of the features I wanted to mention that you might not be so aware of are particularly useful for when you've got repeating things of the same type. Up here at the top of your screen, we've got cache coding as an option. Now, if we go into this, what this allows you to do is reconcile multiple items with the same details, the same description, the same account, tax rate, and all that. Do them all in one bulk go. So particularly if you're just starting out with Xero and you've got a couple of months worth of transactions, or you've left your bank rec for a little while, it can happen, and going back to it, and we've got a lot of transactions to do. If we have repeating things that are of similar types, we can use this to do them all at once. Easiest way to do this typically would be to sort by the payee, as I can do there, and then select ones that are the same. So let's say we've got these two for Parkside Kiosk. If I just tick the box, highlights them both, and then anything that I write in the description for one of them will then populate for all the selected ones. The same goes for the account. So if I put this to general expenses and then select the VAT rate, and then all we need to do is click this Save and Reconcile selected button at the bottom, and any number, or it was only 2 transactions there, but there could be 10, 20, 30, depending on what you've got. It doesn't matter if the amounts are different, and it's putting them all to that same place. So that's quite a quick way of catching up almost on sort of historical ones. But perhaps you've got a similar kind of situation where you've got things that are going through regularly, but obviously they haven't happened yet. They're going to happen in the future. We know we're going to consistently get these costs or receipts coming through, and we want to set up something to make that a bit quicker. What we can do is use bank rules. These will basically use a set of criteria. Xero will automatically look at any transactions through the bank, and according to the criteria, apply the rule to them. So if I just go to our second page of transactions here, we'll see that we've got multiple ones for central city parking. We've got £12 here, we've got £12 here, and we've got £12 here each day. So they're regularly getting these amounts, rather than simply putting in the information on this one and then putting on the next one and the next one. We can create a rule. So if we click on the Create Rule button and next to the first one of those transactions, it will take us to the Create Rule screen. It's a spend money rule because we're on a cost rather than an income. And it's already started to populate some of the information here. So the first section it wants to know is what criteria is it looking at? And because it's seen that the payee for the line that we chose is central city parking, it's already said, well, the condition we're going to look at is the payee equal to that? You can choose all sorts of different conditions. So you could be looking at the amount, you could be looking at the description, and you can have multiple ones as well. And you can also change exactly how detailed is it looking at it. If you know the payee is always exactly central city parking, you can leave it on equals and it will be fine. But perhaps some things that come through the bank have various different digits or additional characters after them. So if you just change that to say contains, it will have anything that contains that bit, regardless of additional characters that the bank like to put on these transactions, it will still work. The next thing we need to choose is then what the contact is going to be that it applies to this transaction. You can either search for an existing one if it's already a contact within your database, but if not, as with anywhere in Xero, if you just type out the full name, it will create it the first time it uses it, and then it will be one of your contacts. The next two options are to do with how you're allocating that amount. Most cases, it will simply be a case of the single amount going to a single place. So you could just put in a description, such as parking fees, choose what account that is going to, say parking charges, brings in the default rate for that account, and we're putting 100% there. But obviously you could add in additional lines, you could split things out, say 50-50 if it was a cost that was being shared out between two directors or something like that. And in this number 3 here, you could put out individual fixed lines. So if you knew that the first £10 of every transaction was one thing, and then the remaining 100% was something else, you can split it out there. So complete flexibility as to how this rule is going to apply. Final parts here are just setting what the reference is. You can either choose it manually or get it to pick it up from some of the information from the bank itself. Choose what bank account it's running on. Defaults to the bank account that this transaction was through, but we can say it's going to go to all if we want that, and then just a name for the rule. So if we save on that there, that will create the rule, take us back to our bank rec, and you can see that on where we created that rule, it's now applying it. We can choose not to apply it if we don't want it, but otherwise all we need to do as normal is click OK to reconcile that. But we also have anywhere else where we've got exactly the same things, we can see it's applying that same rule. So it's just saving a bit of time, setting it up so that any time in the future these come through, this is always going to be ready and saving us some time.
It's David here, just to say hello to everyone. A question that's just come through is whether we can set up rules to make a transfer from one account to another, which I don't believe at the moment is something that's possible. Although one of the great things with these cloud applications like Xero is that they're very responsive to feedback, and improvements and updates come through all the time. So I know it's something that personally I've actually spoken to the master about, because it would help me in some situations. So don't be surprised if that feature is added at some time in the future. But at the moment, I don't think that is something we can do to set up automatic transfers.
So I think that's correct, but yeah, the amount of updates that come through on a fairly regular basis, I wouldn't be surprised if we see it in the not too distant future. So moving on, the next thing I wanted to highlight was entering manual journals. Now, this you access from this advisor tab. Now it's possible, depending on your rights within the particular Xero data that you have access to, if you don't have advisor level access, you won't actually see this. So if you can't see that tab, that'll be the reason why. But under here, we have the option for manual journals. And this is going to be where we want to add in things that don't come from the bank. Now, Xero is all very much driven from the bank. The core principle being that the information from the bank is your core data, and everything can stem from that. But there are always some things which don't go through the bank and do need to put in additionally, such as depreciation, accruals, prepayments, that kind of thing. So I'm going to just show you how to, say, put in a depreciation journal. So from here, we can choose new journal, and we get this journal screen. We can put in a narration for what it is, choose a date that this is going to go in, and then populate the lines of the journal. So I'm going to put my depreciation expense. That's 700. And then for the sake of ease, I'm just going to say it's all office equipment depreciation. And you can see it's automatically said, well, 700 credit would balance this off, but we can change that if we need to and make further lines on the journal. Now, if I just post this, that's going to add it in and go into our Xero data, as you might expect. But if I now jump to what I think is a fairly useful report, which is the cash summary report. So just in case you haven't seen this report, summarizing all of the cash inflows and outflows for any particular period, and then summarizing at the bottom with the opening bank balance and the closing, which should tie up to your bank, given that it's all directly fed from there. But what we'll see on here is, because we put through this journal, it's actually added in this depreciation expense into this cash summary, which obviously isn't quite correct. It's not a cash item, so we really don't want that on there. So if I just go back to our journals, the reason for this, there's a tick box on the journal screen, which potentially annoyingly defaults to ticked. And if I just go in and edit this journal, it's this one here, show journal on cash basis reports. Now, in my mind, most journals that you're putting through are going to be non-cash items, typically because it's the non-cash things that we haven't got from the bank. And so I believe that most of the time you're doing a journal, you probably want to untick that, particularly if you're making use of reports such as that cash one. So if we have that unticked, post that. Nice and easy to edit the journals as well, I should point out. You can go in and edit any journal at any point. And then if we jump back to our cash summary, we'll now see that that depreciation amount has gone from there. So we're back to just the pure cash items being shown on this cash summary. So just really to highlight that little tick box probably wants to be unticked the majority of the times you're doing a manual journal. So as we're already looking in reports, we'll carry on with reporting. if we go to all reports, I mean, Xero has a multitude of reports available, all sorts of things. Pretty much if there's a report that you want, there's probably one that exists. As you can see from this all report screen, categorized in these various different sections. And one thing to be aware of, some people haven't quite realized, where we've got these 3 dots at the bottom of these sections, you can click on there and it actually expands those sections out, and there's a lot more reports hiding underneath there that you might not have seen. So do be aware that there's all sorts of things that you might find useful. And also the little star icon here, any of those, if you find them that you're using them regularly, you can click the star and that will add it to your list of favorites under the reports button. So it's just one less click to get to that particular report. Another thing on reporting that I really want to highlight is a potentially better way of getting more information from the reports that you're pulling up. What we can do is apply what's called tracking categories. I mean, you may have noticed when I was doing the manual journal and when I was putting through the bank reconciliation items, there was a region option that was showing up there, which you may have not seen in your Xero data. And that is, as I say, what's known as a tracking category. And it allows for an additional level of analysis to be put through on any item that goes through your system. So under the general settings, we've got tracking as an option here. And if I go into here, we will see the tracking options that are set up on this data. So this has got a tracking category called region, and then it's got 4 different options, which things can be chosen to. So this is for the different regions that they happen to operate in. If we want to add additional categories to an existing tracking category, we can easily do that. So let's say we want a central region. I can just add that in, and then that will then be available to put transactions to and report on. And you can also have a second level of categorization. So we can have up to 2 different tracking categories. So let's say, for example, we want to report on who a salesperson is for particular sales. We can create a category called that, and then we can have 3 different people, or have as many as you need. Oops, Chris. And we can save that. And that gives us, say, that second level of reporting. So to show how that works in practice, if I was to go and create a sales invoice, click on New here, and let's just put in some information for this. And let's say it's for development work. I'll fill in the usual information. Let's say £2,000. Defaults to our sales code and our tax rate. But as you can see, we've now got 2 columns here. So we've got the region, and we've got our 5 different options now. So let's choose our new central region that we created. We've got our salesperson option as well. So let's say it was Chris that made this sale. And if we approve this into our data.
And I think that's something which those of us that have come from perhaps the Sage area of accounting systems in the past, where we might have used a department category before. Of course, the department, there was only one field that we had there. So the fact that Xero allows us to have multiple different tracking categories, so up to 2 levels, so we can have both a region and salesperson. I've had clients that have used it for all sorts of things, from different vehicles, if you want to track the costs on a range of minibuses or tractors or something like that. Then the ability to have that second tracking category is quite often a useful benefit.
Yes, thank you, David. So to show you how this is then taken effect, if we jump to our profit and loss report, we will see by default it's showing us the 3-month range, but in our options at the top here, we've got a couple of different ones. We can do compare by regions, And when we choose that, we will now see it's split across the different regions, and that new sale that we put through has gone to our central region. And similarly, we can compare by salespeople. So at the moment, because we only just created it, we've only got that one thing for Chris, and everything else is unassigned. You can have things unassigned. Basically, you don't have to assign transactions to have to any particular category. It doesn't force you to choose a category for everything that goes through. So you can simply use it for the things that you need to group together, and everything else can just be sort of bulked in the unassigned, and it doesn't matter that that's the way that they are. So say, hopefully that might find that relevant to your particular business. Obviously, it's going to depend what sort of things you might want to report on, but the flexibility of having any up to 2 categories in there, you might find that something that you can get some more useful information from your reports. Moving on to contacts then.
Just before you move on, Gary, another little question come up about the advisor tab. This is something which, as Gary said, is not available to everyone depending on the access rights. If your Xero package is coming from M&A partners, then certainly talk to us and we can open up that advisor tab for you. If you are getting your Xero package directly from Xero, then the likelihood is that you probably will have access to that advisor tab by default. So yeah, we can certainly open that up for those that need to.
Yes, thank you, David. Yeah, it's all controlled from the user settings. So if you have got your Xero yourself and don't have the advisor tab, have a look in the user settings and see. You should be able to see who's got what within there. So yes, moving on to contacts. Contacts database, very useful. All sorts of information stored within there. If you want to find out information about particular suppliers, customers, very helpful how it collates it all together. You can look at individual reports and such like statements for particular businesses. One of the reasons it populates so easily, though, can also be a bit of a downfall insofar as, as we looked at when we were creating the bankroll, if you just put in a name that you haven't used before, it will create a new contact for it. Which does, in some instances, give the possibility that you end up with duplicate clients because perhaps you put in a slightly different name than the used before, or perhaps you put LTD on one and then you put limited on the other. And also, if you're using some of the integrated softwares, like something like Receipt Bank, which is digitally reading the data. It might be that it reads it slightly different on a different invoice, or the invoice layout from a customer changes and it reads the name slightly different. And what you can end up with is the same customer or supplier effectively having multiple contacts within them and potentially having their information split across them, which then makes the usefulness of the contacts area a lot less.
Certainly, yes, Gary. We find that with Receipt Bank, which is an add-on that we use with quite a few Xero businesses, which is scanning in purchase invoices. And sometimes if the invoices aren't that clear or the photograph is taken on a mobile phone, a little bit blurry, then you can get several different variations of the same supplier name coming across, which initially starts to look like a bit of a nightmare. But yeah, can easily be dealt with.
Yes. So as you can see on our list here, we've got a couple of ABC furnitures, one just ABC, another with A.B.C. Quite easy that this can happen, as we just mentioned, but luckily it's also quite easy to resolve. Xero gives you a way to merge multiple contacts together, and it as it says, it merges them together, so it brings all of the amounts for the invoices, all the things relating to them into one place, and then you're back down to the one contact that you might want. So the way you can do this, if you click on the contact, or multiple ones if you've got multiples that need to go together, the ones that you want to effectively get rid of and merge into your master one. So in this instance, the .b.c one is the one we don't want. We then click on Options and Merge, and it then asks us where we want to merge this with. So I'm going to choose the other ABC one. And it does confirm here that it's going to archive A.B.C and merge it with the other one. So if you're ever not sure which way round it is, this screen, before you've done anything, does just confirm that. So don't be afraid to go that far. So if we hit on merge, it then merges the two together. So you can now see that the amount owed is now the full 2100 just on this single one. And if we go into here, the £700 invoice that was on the other one, 900, sorry, is now within here, and it's all merged together. As you can see, it confirms that in the activity, that's what's happened, and we've got all the information in one place. So just a nice way of keeping the contacts database helpful and tidy. I've seen some where it has sort of blown out of control, and it gets to the point where people won't even want to look at it because it's just unwieldy. And being able to get the most out of it is what Xero is all about. So just spending that little bit of time merging these things together can really, really make it useful in the future. Okay, rounding. You've probably not thought all that much about rounding in Xero, at least I hope you haven't, because for the most part, Xero does it all for you. Any rounding differences, it works out and it deals with them itself. The way it does that, within the chart of accounts, there's a default code, defaults to 860, I believe it is. Yes, 860 rounding. It's one of the locked ones because it's a default system account, and Xero will put any little differences, be it a VAT calculation differences, or little things like that, and it puts them into this account. So as I say, for the most part, you won't have to worry about it. The reason I'm going to mention it here is that the type of account that it defaults to is a current liability one, which then shows on your balance sheet, which means that going forward year on year, it will be bringing forward this rounding balance, whatever amount it might be, and potentially could start to build up over time to the point where the rounding difference is actually a notable amount. Not a huge thing, but what we tend to do is go into the details of this code and just change it from a liability one to a profit and loss code, typically to expense, and save that. So what that's going to do is within each year, any rounding difference for the whole year will be wrapped up within the profit and loss for that year. Nothing gets carried forward. And no sort of erroneous little balances can start to build up. We think this is just a slightly better way of dealing with it, and typically what you really want to be doing. So not a huge thing, but just possibly something to be aware of. Moving on to navigation within the software. You may or may not be aware that there's a very nice little tool for quickly creating new things, which is this plus button up here. If we click on this, it just gives you a shortcut to create new of all these different types: invoices, bills, contacts, spend money and receive money transactions, all these kinds of things. So things that you might want to do on a relatively regular basis, and then you can get to new invoice from 2 clicks, as opposed to perhaps going to accounts, then going to sales, and then clicking on the new button. Not a huge difference, but anything that can save that little bit of time, particularly if you have some recurring thing that you're needing to do, just a useful one to be aware of. Also, a useful thing, which again is in this bar up here, is this little search button here. Now, unfortunately, I can't show you how this search works within the demo data. It's disabled within there. But if I just jump back to my PowerPoint, I can show you on here. So when you click that little magnifying glass, brings up a little bar, and you can start typing in there. And it's a very powerful search. It will search everything within your data. So as you can see in the example there, if you start typing Voda, it's found Vodafone. And it's not just searched in one place. So it's searched contacts, it's searched your bills, it will search your bank transactions. So those 49 results, although they're all for Vodafone, it's found multiple different things. Now you can slim those results down to only show the particular thing. So if you only wanted to see bills, you could only look at that. Only want to see contacts, you could do that. Or you can click on view all results and see the whole thing. But you don't have to just search for a contact name. You could be searching for perhaps an invoice number. Put the invoice number in and it's going to slim down and to find that. It might be an amount. It will basically search on anything that is a piece of information within your data, and it will search on that. So quite a powerful tool. If you know what you're looking for, that's probably going to be the quickest way to get there, rather than any other way that you might manually go through, going into contacts and scrolling down to the V's and clicking on Vodafone, or going into your bills and then scrolling down to sorting them by invoice number and finding the relevant invoice number. It's just going to be a quicker way to get there. So again, not a huge thing, but might just save you that bit of time when you're navigating around. Also linked in with this is a selection of shortcuts that Xero has. To start with, if you press the forward slash, it will open up the search window. So that box that we got to by clicking on the magnifying glass, if you just click on the forward slash button key on your keyboard, it will go put the cursor straight into that. And then you've got various different buttons that will move you to different areas. So if you do /I enter, it will take you straight to all invoices. /D straight back to the dashboard. So again, not a huge deal if you don't know about these things, but if you're particularly keen at moving around fast, like using keyboard shortcuts for every reason, be aware that they exist, and you might just find your way to move around the data is that much. I
think we've found in the past that when we've done other workshops that some people are so used to using keyboards that the shortcuts are just a revelation. So certainly when we discovered them, that was it does make life a lot easier just to jump around.
Yes, indeed. So just to summarize then what we've gone over, and what I'd really say is sort of the top tips to take away, and hopefully at least some of these might be things that are useful for you. The cache coding, be aware of this. If you have a big backlog of similar bank reconciliation transactions that you need to put through and they're all going to the same place, be aware that option exists, because it should save you a lot of time. And similarly, but from the sort of future perspective, if every time you're doing your bank rec, you're seeing the same sort of item going through and you're having to put that information in, you can use the bank rule so that when they come up the next time and the next time, next week, next month, it's already pre-populating that information for you. Tracking, if your business has particular categories of information, that's ways to split down the transactions that you have, be aware that those tracking options exist and that they might be useful for you. Merging of contacts, just keeping the contacts database nice and tidy. Anything that's duplicate ones that have been created through whatever means, merge them together and just keep it all nice. Rounding to the P&L, again, not a huge issue, but perhaps take 30 seconds just to change that option so that we're not getting odd rounding things accumulating up over time as we use Xero year on year. And finally, those search and shortcut options that we mentioned, particularly the search one. I think if there's something that you need to find, the search is powerful and useful and will get you to what you need to get to very quickly. So that's pretty much everything we want to cover today. Do we have any questions?
Well, I know there's a couple of questions which people have asked previously. One of which was, can Xero handle multi-currency transactions? So, Gary, I don't know if you can give us a bit of an insight into multi-currency.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, sure. You can do multi-currency within Xero. It does require you to be on a slightly different plan from the standard one. You need to be on the business edition plan. But once you're on that, you can have as many currencies as you need. And then Xero uses xe.com every day to get the current exchange rates and works out all the exchange differences and all those kinds of things, translating them back into your base currency as you would need.
Yeah, and I think you mentioned about the business edition plan. Probably worth mentioning at this point in time. Yes, I mean some people may have their Xero subscription directly with Xero. Others may well have that through their monthly fee with M&A partners. Clearly, if it's a case of your package is bundled through M&A, then talk to us if you need to change the rights and facilities you have. And obviously we can incorporate that within the monthly cost that we have. And for those that are currently getting their Xero directly from Xero, it might be something worth talking to the partner or your account manager at M&A Partners about incorporating the Xero subscription within a monthly fee, because quite often you can find that that is a better route to go down. There's another question popped up here about do we need to only create bills for VAT invoices? Lots of online purchases from the USA with no VAT. Certainly, that's right. I mean, you don't need to create bills if you've got invoices that are coming through. Typically, those that come through from Receipt Bank in general will be non-currency related, so you might need to manually override the currency on those. Otherwise, then there's no need to actually put those in as a bill. You can deal with them directly from the bank reconciliation and just post them straight as an expense, probably even setting up a bank rule just to allocate them directly. So that could be a good route there. Another question I know we've had asked in the past and probably worth mentioning here is about the year-end process. So something which I know that I've in the past, again, when I've been dealt with a lot of Sage businesses, that the year-end was one of those nightmare scenarios that people dreaded. And oh, goodness me, what am I going to do? Gary, can you tell us a little bit about the year-end process in Xero?
Yeah, sure. Well, it's pretty simple because I mean there isn't really a year-end process at all. The way Xero works, it knows what year-end date you are, and whenever you go to produce any sorts of reports, be that balance sheet, P&L, anything like that, it looks at the dates that you're asking it to prepare for, and it calculates everything, opening balances, rounding, closing off of accounts, all that kind of thing. It does it on the fly for the particular report that you're trying to show. So you never have to worry about any particular close down or anything like that. The only thing that I would say that you might want to do is use a lock date. So within the settings, you can apply a lock date per a particular point. So perhaps once you've gone a few months past the year end and you're happy that everything in the previous year is all complete, you can set the lock date for the year end date. Perhaps send your information off to your accountant to say, look, it's all finished, we're not going to make any changes, and then nothing can accidentally get put into that period. It's not irreversible, so you can go back and undo that date if there is something that needs to be changed, but it just stops the accidents of accidentally typing something into that period when you'd thought it had all been finished. Okay, so I think that's everything for today. Like we said, if you do think of any other questions or anything else comes up, feel free to contact us and we will get in touch with an answer.
There's one further question just popped up about where is the lock function. I think that's in the settings, isn't it? I don't know.
Yes, yes. Within the general settings, I might just be able to jump and show you that. If we go into general settings and then under financial settings here, so the second option,
which hopefully works in the demo data.
And then, yeah, we've got a lock date here, so you can stop all users from making changes on a particular date, except advisors, and then you can do one that does everybody, including the advisors. So you can choose that within there.
Fine. Okay. I mean, if there are any other questions coming through, we'll probably deal with those after we close the webinar. So keep the comments and things coming through.
Yeah, and say thank you for attending. When you close out of the webinar, you should be directed to a short questionnaire, just to give us a little bit of feedback on what we've done today and potentially the things that we might be able to do for the future, just to help us improve our webinar offerings. But yeah, other than that, thank you very much for attending.